Good afternoon, and welcome to Smithsonian Gardens' weekly webinar series, Let's Talk Gardens. This is our last presentation for the year of 19, that shows my age, 2020. We will start up our programs again next year in mid-January. The schedule will be placed on our website, and you'll be able to find out different programs to be able to attend. This is our last Let's Talk Gardens, but tomorrow we have a very special presentation called Gardens of Resilience. And that's going to be a discussion with two of my friends who are involved in their community as gardeners or promoters of gardens. And we're going to talk about how different this year was because of all the challenges we had and what it has done to our gardens and green spaces. And are they distributed fairly? Does everyone have access to a green space and a garden? So I hope that you join us tomorrow for a very special discussion and presentation. But today we have a great look at what you can do at home to make your home feel more like the holidays. What do we do here at Smithsonian Gardens, and how can you learn from our specialists? So we have two very special presenters, Jill Gonzalez and Melanie Pyle, and they will introduce themselves in a minute. But first, I want to tell you, please put your questions in the chat box. We will answer them after both presentations have been made. So we won't interrupt. We will go from one presentation to the next, and then we'll answer your questions after that. We're truly looking forward to this bright spot in our calendar today to learn how to make our houses more festive. So Jill Gonzalez and Melanie Pyle, will you please introduce yourself before our presentations, and then we'll jump into the show. Jill, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jill Gonzalez. I am the lead horticulturist in the production section at the greenhouses in Suitland, Maryland. So I'm responsible for scheduling and buying all the plugs and plant material, the seeds, sowing and planting, and all the fun stuff that we do every season to get our plants ready for the gardens at the museums. Just a little bit of background. I'm going to talk about poinsettias specifically today. I've been growing poinsettias since 1986, so that shows my age. I'll let you do the math. And at one time, I was growing about in charge of about 20,000 at the retail where I was working. So we had a lot to do at Christmas, and I was also in charge of selling them too. So I was pretty busy. But I've also, over the years, have grown geraniums, bedding plants, Easter lilies. That was one of my first jobs coming out of college was you're going to grow the Easter lilies for us, which is a real challenge and very stressful to get those things to bloom on time. And I've grown perennials, mums, everything under the sun. And I've also sold all that too. So been pretty busy for the last many years. One of my challenges back then there was very little automation where I was. So I've learned over the years to be very observant and keep checking and be in the greenhouse. So I think my crops, and you'll see some of the nice pictures that I have on my PowerPoint today that will kind of reflect that and what I do every day.
Jill, thank you. And if you want to see Jill's work, just come on downtown to Smithsonian Gardens and you'll see the pansies and the kale and everything else that's in the garden right now is because of Jill and Joe's handiwork, her co-production coordinator. So thank you for that. Melanie, would you introduce yourself, please, and tell us who you are?
Yes, Melanie Pyle. I'm the lead horticulturist with the Interiors Department of Smithsonian Gardens. Uh, Myself and my two coworkers are responsible for all of the interior displays you see in, I believe it's 13 different museums at the Smithsonian campus. You can't see anything I do right now, but with my slide presentation, hopefully you can imagine what we do during the holiday seasons. Anyway, I've been here for 25 years, almost 26, and was with the National Zoo before that, and love doing what I'm doing.
You both must have started working when you were 15 years old because you look way too young
Oh,
to be with Smithsonian for that long. So I'm going to go ahead and start Jill's presentation. So I'll disappear, and then Melanie, you're going to kick in after Jill's presentation is over and share your screen with us to be able to go. So let's get this show on the road. Okay, you're set, Jill.
okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, well, this is just my introduction. This is the crop this year at a couple of the greenhouses. I was able to take some good pictures, I think, this year of a really awesome crop. I've titled it Poinsettias, Oh, What Fun, because for me, and I'm not sure if a lot of growers feel the same way, I think this is one of the funnest crops that I grow. It's very time consuming and very meticulous, and that's kind of how I do things. So I really enjoy the poinsettia crop in this time of the year. Okay, on the next slide. I just wanted to give you a little background. This is something that you can find on the internet, but the history of the poinsettia goes way, way back, even into the 14th and 15th, 16th century, the Aztecs, and it's native to Mexico, Central America, particularly southern Mexico. And at one time, the Aztecs used it. They used the brack as a dye, and the sap that does come out of it for fevers, to treat fever. So it was used medicinally all those years ago. It was brought to Mexico City by Montezuma. But the native plant is actually about 12 to 15 feet tall. It's a huge, huge plant out in the landscape. Now here it's tropical. It's not something that you could put out and leave out all year round, but in other areas of the world, you can do that. And it just basically colors by itself whenever the lighting changes. So it kind of takes care of itself, but it is in the euphorbia family. So if you have any euphorbia, perennial euphorbia, you see some of the annual bedding plant euphorbia now that they have around, you'll see that there's latex in that when you break off a leaf or the stem. So it's in the euphorbia family because of that. It was discovered by a German botanist, and he found it growing in his crack in his greenhouse. So he took cuttings from it and so forth and was propagating it. And then, of course, we all know about Joel Poinsett, and obviously that's where the poinsettia got its name. In honor of him, he was the ambassador from the United States to Mexico, and he brought it over in 1828. He brought it to South Carolina and grew it in his greenhouse and gave it out to all his friends. And we know now National Poinsettia Day is coming up on Saturday, and it's in honor of Joel Poinsett. On the day he died. And it's kind of something I can remember because it's my mother's birthday, so it's a good way to kind of associate the two. But we were having that as actually the National Poinsettia Day is on the 12th, which is coming up. A lot of people think that the actual flower is what you see there, the red, and that's actually a modified leaf. The actual center of the poinsettia, the cyathea, is what the actual flower is, where you see the nectar, you see the pollen, you see the flower parts. And one of the major myths is that it's poisonous. And I used to have a lot of customers come into the retail saying they wouldn't buy them because they were afraid somebody would eat them and die. And, there is some, if you do consume it, which I don't recommend anybody doing, with pets and so forth, it does kind of upset your stomach if you eat a little bit of it. But really that myth, it's not really considered poisonous. Some people are allergic to the sap. If you have any latex allergies or so forth, you might have some reaction to the sap. But other than that, it's a pretty safe. I wouldn't recommend eating it or nibbling on it, or have your cat or your dog nibbling on it, but certainly it's okay to have around. Next slide then. So what we do at the greenhouse is we have to decide what we're going to grow every year. And I base what I grow on what the interior section and Melanie decides on. So it depends on their color scheme, pretty much in what the in color is that year. And the real challenge is I have to pick varieties that are early. I have to pick varieties that are late because I don't want them all ready at the same time. We do 2 installs so that the plants always look fresh. So I have to have something ready around Thanksgiving, and then I have to have something ready 2 to 3 weeks after that. So it's really essential to be able to pick out varieties that are going to be early versus late. Years ago, we didn't have that luxury. When I started selling poinsettias and growing poinsettias, we basically had 1 or 2 red varieties. I mean, that was all that was in the industry. So we had to manipulate the lighting in order to get things that were ready to sell before Thanksgiving or around Thanksgiving, and then some that were later. So we would put up lights, we would modify, and we would put up black cloth to keep things shaded. So it was a real challenge at that time. Now they're breeding varieties that are, it's already bred in them to be early or late. So I have to pick out, everything has to be picked out, whether it's early or late, every variety. So this is just 2 examples of a red, which is the most popular color at this point. It still is, it's still the favorite, very traditional. On the left is the Ferrara red, which is a new variety the last few years. And then we have a Prestige red, which is the late variety on the right-hand side that you see. Next slide, please. Again, I had to pick out, every variety has to be either early or late. The whites are a little challenged because when everybody wants a pure white, paper white variety, and that's really hard to get. Over the few years, the last couple of years, I've been noticing some of the varieties, newer varieties, are a little bit whiter, but most of them are kind of on that creamy white side. But the left side is the White Star, which we do for the early round. And then we've done Infinity Polar now for the last couple of years, which is a really nice dark green leafed plant, variety for our late variety. And you'll see that's our 12-inch pot. That's one of our big signature pots that we grow for the museums. Our museums are so kind of expanse, so these big plants really work well in some of the museums. Next slide. Here's an example of marble, which has fairly been around for a long time. You know, basically when I started in retail, we had a red, we had a white, and we had a marble, which was kind of an oddity back in the 80s. But some people like it, some people don't. I tend to like it. I think it's kind of unique. And again, I have to pick out an early variety and a late variety. So premium marble, which is one of the newer varieties in the last couple of years, tends to be a little earlier. And then we have the Mars marble on the right. Next slide, please. This is just one picture of a kind of an overall picture of what it looks like early in the season after I've done spacing a little bit. I space several times through the season as I get space, because we're really kind of at a challenge. We have fall crops, pansies and kale and cabbage and things growing in the greenhouses. Until we can get those outside, depending on the weather, I'm kind of cramped for space. So as I get some space, I start moving things. So on the very left, you see some of our 7-inch, and this was probably taken, back in September or late August, early September. In the middle picture, you see an overhead of all the large 12-inch pots that and I think there's some other smaller ones in here, but that's basically the one house for now. And then as I spread out, I moved into other houses. And on the right-hand side are some hanging baskets. We do a few of those as well, and they have to be put together. So I do a huge array of different types of sizes. 12-inch are the biggest ones, all the way down to sometimes a 4-inch, 6-inch. We do about 1,500 to 2,000 different varieties every year, depending on the season. And probably between 12 and 15 varieties between the 2 installs that I have to deal with. So we have quite a variety in there. Some of the challenges that I have, we do have a lot of automation here, so I do have that. But pests are a challenge, the weather's a challenge, especially in the middle of the summer when our first cuttings come in late June, early July, around July 4th. And then every 2 weeks after that, I get 3 shipments. And it's in the heat of the summer, so you can have 100-degree days. So in our greenhouses, the vents are open, but there's not a whole lot you can do when it's 100 degrees outside. So there's some challenges there. There's challenges with pests. root issues, things like that. Next slide, please.
And Jill, isn't this where we're going to share a poll with the people so that they can help you out with, do they ever do what you do to try to get the poinsettias to color up? So should I share that poll with them now?
Sure.
So we're going to try this and find out if you have tried to do what Jill has to do professionally every single year. So have you tried to save your poinsettias from year to year and get them to change color for their bracts? Because Jill gets them, as you can see, in their green form, since they're just leaves, and she's got to get them to color up every single year. So far I'm watching very few people have tried to save the poinsettia afterwards, and a small percentage, but some have been able to get them to color again. So I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results with everyone so that they can see what group that they fall in with. So there you go.
Great.
I fall in that last category. I have never tried to save the plant after the holidays. So tell us about how the challenges that you face in this area, and give some hints on how we can save it from time to time.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, that was probably the number one question I had working in retail for many years, or people would call, how could I save my poinsettia? And it takes a little diligence. You can keep it outside in the spring and the summer, but bring it in before frost. Cut it back, because usually it looks pretty rough. So I've seen some pretty rough ones where there's no leaves left on it. But if you keep caring for it, it'll branch back out again. But the real challenge is trying to get it to flower and color on time. And a lot of people kind of forget what to do and when. So typically I go by the summer solstice, and when we get into the fall, after the summer is over, about the end of September, I would say you start your short days, long nights. They like long nights in order to color on time. So you have to mimic that. A lot of times you don't get that right away. And it takes several weeks after that to keep putting it in darkness at night and taking it out during the day. And one of the problems was most of my customers would leave them in the closet. They put it in a closet, someplace dark. They'd leave it in there and they wouldn't bring it out. And then they bring it out in November and it'd be dead. And they would wonder why. It's like, well, you have to bring it out during the day. So you have to bring it out during the day, give it its sunlight, its food, its water, its care. And then take it in the evening. So they like that long night, short day. They're photoperiodic, which is what that means. And a lot of things are like that. Mums are like that as well. So that's the real challenge, is if there's any light pollution, you get a flashlight or you open the door and the light shines in, it'll interrupt them. So the challenges were always to keep light from coming into the greenhouses. And we used to have to put black plastic up on the windows. We would close the retail center at 5 o'clock, so we would get out of there and would have headlights shining in. So there was a lot of challenges there. And I have seen cases where a back corner of the greenhouse wasn't coloring at the same time as some of the other areas of the greenhouse, and you knew there was light pollution. There was a light pole outside that had to be turned off. So it definitely the light does affect if you get it interrupted in the middle of the night. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is trying to get things to color on time. So that's what I've encountered over the years. For me, poinsettias are very time consuming. There's just a lot of things you need to do. And over the years I have learned there are a lot of things to do. We do pinching at certain times. So after I plant them and put them under mist for a few days just to acclimate them, because we are in the heat of the summer, they have to do a little bit of an acclimatization. They're rooted cuttings that come in, and then I do bring them out into the greenhouse, and then within about 3 weeks I'll pinch them. If we want some branched plants, which mostly what we grow, I will pinch to get them to branch. So you see here in this picture, this is just an example of the 12-inch, and they're started in a 4-inch pot in July, and then sometime in late August, I will stand and pot every one of those up. I put 5 in each pot, and I size them up, make sure they're all about the same height. And then later on, you see those big green cane stakes. Every one is staked and tied for support. So I did that. I spent mostly, a good part of the fall tying poinsettias. They go through a drench. We have to watch how, pests, especially when after they're ready to go into the museum, we don't want insects on them. Whiteflies is a big problem. So usually I'll do a preventative, like a systemic insecticide early on to get about 3 months of coverage. And then of course, when you have the heat of the summer and you don't have spacing right away, plants will stretch. You have some varieties that are very aggressive, some that stay a lot shorter. So, I have to look at all this stuff. I have to be very observant and be in the greenhouse, because we maybe have to spray some plant growth regulators to keep things in check as far as height wise. So there's a lot of steps to go through when you're growing a poinsettia. And it's all those important steps, 'cause that's what makes your crop shine at the end. And of course, spacing and all that stuff. So we're always doing something with poinsettias. Next slide. So again, I was just talking about lighting. They need short days, long nights. So slightly longer night than a short day will make them to start turn color. And again, we start about September 22nd. And we'll do this until about mid-November. Now here at this greenhouse, we haven't had any problem with light pollution. We didn't know when we first moved in here in 2010 if we were going to have that, because we do have security lights and street lights and so forth. But so far, we haven't really noticed any issues with light pollution. We do have to let security know, of course, that we have poinsettias in the greenhouse. And if they ever come in and have to turn the lights on at 2 o'clock in the morning, it could interrupt them briefly. So there's a couple challenges there. But for the most part, we just let them go naturally, and they'll turn when they're ready to turn. And upper left corner, you'll see that's not just a picture of the early growth. In the middle picture, you see they're starting to turn. And boy, once they start to turn, you'll see them start to turn maybe about mid-October. Maybe into late October, depending on the variety, and they just take off after that. So you can kind of see the stages there of what's happening. But it's really kind of a neat thing to walk through the greenhouse and just start to see them turn. And I always call them the ugly Betty stage, because they kind of get a little bit yellowy, and you can kind of tell they're starting to turn. And this is all just from years and years of just observing these. So you can kind of tell when they're ready to start going and doing their thing. Next slide, please. So this is what we turned out this year. This is one greenhouse out of 4. I have to say, it was just very brilliant. And we did some really neat varieties. We try trials. We do some trials every year just to see what's going on. Melanie does a good job of mixing up varieties, and we get our favorites. And every year is different, like I said. Excuse me. This year we did a little bit more of different variety. Some years is more one color than the other. But overall, this is what I see every day when I go into the greenhouse. So it's been really nice to have this view every day when I go in. At this point, we usually slow down a little bit on the feeding and water. They don't like wet feet. So they don't take up as much water, especially when it gets cooler out. So just be careful with that. When you are at home, be careful with the water. They like that room temperature. At 65 degrees, even a little coolers will keep them fresher. And another thing too, a lot of people used to ask me, what's the freshest looking? When you see the center, the actual flowers, the cyathea, closed up and they're not open yet, emitting their pollen, or they're not falling out, because they will drop. The centers will drop as the plant ages. That's when you start to see the decline of the color. So when you're looking for a fresh poinsettia, wherever you go to get your poinsettia, you want to make sure those centers are either closed or there. If you see nothing, then it's probably not going to last you very long. So that's another good indication of how fresh the poinsettia is. We do a little bit of like late plant growth regulator just to keep things from growing, because they will grow up in November, and they'll do a final kind of stretch. So that's kind of our challenge there. We also want to make sure, again, that we don't have pests later on, because we don't want them going into the museums with insects. That's not a good thing. Next slide. This one is just the evolution of what I've seen over the years and what we've kind of evolved into. This is just a smattering of what's out there now. I think I read somewhere there was a couple hundred, just hundreds of varieties of plants now. And when you go to trials and things, they're not even named yet. There's so many. They're looking for how they're hold up for shipping and retail and so forth. So these are considered what we consider novelties. Over the years, we've had speckled ones. My first encounter with a speckled bract was Jingle Bells. Maybe everybody's familiar with that one. That's been around a long time. But I actually had a customer thought that I had sprayed bleach on them. And she was really serious about it. So that was kind of I've always remembered that story. She walked up and thought I had sprayed bleach on them. But I've painted poinsettias. I put glitter on them over the years, which I don't like too much. But so I've seen it all. But these are some of the newer ones. There's some newer ones out there. Christmas Mouse. There's Candy Cinnamon, which is kind of very pretty salmony with some speckle in it. Of course, the winter rose red, which looks more like a rose flower. The Alaska, I was saying, white's hard to get a really true white, but this new Alaska we tried this year is looking very white to me this year. So that's kind of a very neat variety.
We know you have so many favorites. So let's find out what the favorites are from our visitors. So I'm going to put up there all these beautiful pictures. If you're going to go out and buy a poinsettia tomorrow, what color would you buy? Jill, what's your favorite? Although that's like asking what child.
Yeah, every year I have a different favorite. I think this year I always like the premium ice crystal, which you see a picture of up on the upper right. That one just, to me, is just spectacular. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably my favorite this year. Some of the other ones were kind of close there in the running. I tend to stick, I like the traditional red, but I like some of the novelties now too. Since I've been growing for so many years, I tend to like the ones that are a little more unique.
I do too. I like Candy Cinnamon and some of the salmon ones. We have a lot of traditional.
Yeah, that's typical. That is still typical.
Red just clashes with my decor, so that's why I like cinnamon a little bit better. So thank you for everyone for sharing their very perfect poinsettia with us.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the yellow when it first came out. That was for a Thanksgiving. That's definitely retail ready at Thanksgiving, and it wasn't much of a plant. That was back in the 80s. But over the years, they've come out with some things called autumn leaves, which we've grown, gold rush, which we've grown, which are very, very pretty if you want something for Thanksgiving. We've done orange, one called orange spice. So those are very, very showy. So it's just, everybody's different, and whatever you like. If you like the traditional, which is what most people do. But I like the more interesting ones too. I think they're such a neat to look at and see what they do. And pinks, of course. There's different shades of pink. This one at the bottom middle is Bravo Pink, which is a trial this year. But we do another one called Marin, which is more salmony, but it's a very sturdy plant. So we tend to use that in the museums, because that's the real challenge in the museums. When they go through cold and heat, no light is the biggest challenge. And that's why we do the 2 installs, so that we can make those plants. Those plants are always fresh, because they just don't last that long with no light. They get a busy weekend in American history, and they get moved around or shoved into, people break them. So we're constantly, and interiors goes down every day and maintains them much of November and December and early January to keep those plants looking good. And we always do grow extra. We have extras built in just because we want to make sure we have enough. So that they're always looking good. So there might be an emergency and we need to get some plants down there. to one of the museums. So we make sure we um, have extras around. And this is just, the next slide was just a shot of how, we sleeve them up to keep them from breaking. We put them on our shelf carts and load them right into a box truck that's been warmed up, especially in December when it's cold. And Melanie and her crew take them down and display them. And this is just some interesting over the years of displays. Upper left was American history. That's just the red one in there. The Kogod Courtyard Portrait Gallery, Ripley Center. So this is just some of the really, really magnificent displays that the interiors have done over the years. American History's tree, the red, white, and blue tree with the poinsettias underneath. The upper top left is just a basket, one of the hanging baskets that I grow that has 9 plants in it. It's a Belden basket with holes around the sides so that it fills in, and that's just sitting down in an urn. It's an instant display. It goes, very quickly. You can have a beautiful display. Castle, we made a poinsettia tree one year, a couple years ago. And then some of the other ones, I think that's natural history on the right. Just some of the displays that we do every year. And Interiors does a great job of getting together and making them look really, really beautiful for the visitors.
Well, we look forward to seeing them next year, next holidays, and we'll see what great creations Interior comes up with. So
I had to finish with this. Obviously, this is where I'd rather be, looking out at the Chesapeake Bay. But it's kind of hard to do when it's 40 degrees outside. But I thought I'd like to finish that with some of my beach pictures and my pups.
Thank you so much for that information. And let's see, Interiors via Melanie can show us and teach us about how to best decorate a tree. So I'm going to stop sharing, Melanie, and you're going to go ahead and jump in and show us. Thank you again, Jill.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's get to slideshow. Okay. Am I good?
Good. It's
okay. So I must say, Jill has done one of the most amazing crops of poinsettias this year I've ever seen her grow. Not quite sure why they turned out so great compared to other years, but wow.
Thank you.
They are amazing. Anyway, so my portion of this session here is going to be about tree decorating. And what we do, meaning we, the interiors department, do inside the museums during holiday time. Again, unfortunately, this year is a little bit different. We usually do upwards of 10 plus trees, which could be a combination of artificial and live trees. I believe our tallest is 17 feet. But the one I'm going to show you is the one and only tree I got to decorate this year, besides my one at home. It's just a 7-foot artificial tree. And it seems to me that although this year is an exception with a lot of live trees being sold, but it seems to me that there are a lot more artificial trees coming online and some really high quality products. So I thought that this is something that might be appealing to you all. So I'm going to go to the first slide. And these are videos. This is the first one that I'm going to show you. It's a pre-fluffed tree. This is what your tree might look like once you take it out of the box for the season. You can see large gaps and some smushed branches. And this is not what you should start decorating. In my opinion, the first thing you can do towards getting a beautifully balanced and beautifully decorated tree is the fluffing. It's very important that this is done before you start adding lights, if you need to add lights, or add any decorations. Again, you can see the gaps, and no artist would start painting on a canvas that wasn't prepared to accept their creation. So before you start decorating, make sure you spend some time fluffing. And the next slide, this is actually what fluffing is going to look like. And let's start this. Okay, here we go. So I'm coming into the picture here, again, showing you some of the spaces um, and showing you my technique. Each tree is designed purposefully to, with the end product being again, fully um, distributed, designed, balanced tree. So each branch is strategically placed to fill a gap when fluffed properly. And you can see that I'm pulling down some of the branches, filling in some of the spaces. You can apply some pressure because these guys are pretty tough, and everything's wired, so you can manipulate the branches as you see fit. But pull them into those spaces. Start separating the branches. It's very important to start your fluffing from the top of the tree and work your way down, because as you can see, I have to get into the tree a little bit and we'll start smushing the bottom branches just by the fact that I need to get to the top. So that's the first step. And then the next slide is going to show you some up close action of what it means to really get in there and get to the middle of the tree, which is where you start. With each branch, you fluff out the inner branches to fill those spaces, and then work your way to the outside of the branch. Again, making sure that it's widening the branch, filling in the space, straightening it as much as you can. Some of these you can see are pushed in and heading upwards where they should be, in the perfect world, aiming more towards the ground, and just using up as much space as you can. And then, oh wait, I gotta go to the next slide. Okay, so this is what the tree looks like once it's been fluffed adequately. You can see it's balanced, all the branches are filled in, and the next step is adding the lights. Again, there is a fine art to lighting a tree properly, and this has come in my 25 years of experience of doing these trees. I think I'm finally at the point where my lighting skills are well honed, and I can talk to you about how to do it and light your tree well too. So again, start at the top. And with the strands, you work your way inside the branch and outside the branch. So by getting the lights towards the center of the tree, you really add depth and adequate spacing. The strand of lights I'm using here are LED lights, and I highly recommend when you choose your lights to use LED lights. If one of the bulbs burns out, the strand will remain lighted. It will not be like the twinkle lights where one goes out and you lose all the lights. The LED strands are a little bit more expensive, but they're built to last for a longer period of time than the twinkle lights. And it's a brighter light, again, longer lasting. And another thing is you can add more strands to one strand than you can with the twinkle lights. Twinkle lights, you're only allowed to add 3 strands together. With the LED lights, you can add as many strands as you'd like. So that's a benefit to our decorating the rather large trees where we need 30 plus strands to adequately light the tree. It's definitely helpful to only have one extension cord running up versus 5 or 6. Okay, so this is the fully lighted tree. You can see the lights are distributed equally throughout. And once you feel like you've gotten to a point where your lights are at this point, take a step back, take 10 steps back, and squint your eyes. This is a trick that we use. If you squint your eyes and look at the tree, you will see, or any gaps that you may have will become more evident to you than if you look with your eyes wide open. Just a little trick to make sure you've covered all the branches. Okay, at this point, it's now time to choose your decorations. With this palette, you see, I chose red and shades of gold. Apparently, these are the hot colors this year. So I thought I would show you some options for this. And it's, well, I guess it's more towards the red slash burgundy spectrum. And I have a mixture of ornaments and what we call floral sprays, as well as some ribbon, which you'll see later on and see how we incorporate that. Um, so that's our palette. And here I'm going to show you steps to making floral sprays. The floral sprays really add um, to the tree, and you'll see after we go through the next couple slides how they really add to the overall design. And here I'm putting together some options for these floral sprays. It's nice to use a combination of berries as well as fruit or any other artificial flowers you may come across. But by combining them, you can create something that is multi-purpose. You know, you can add your two colors together, and then once you've done that, you can wire them with some floral wire. The floral wire you select should have enough strength to it that it would hold these in place, but not too much strength to it that it's not easily manipulated. That's one of the choices of the floral sprays we use for this. And this is another, this is an artificial magnolia, obviously artificial. And what you should make sure you do again here, fluffing is very important. You'll be able to manipulate the blossom the way you'd like. You can get a larger ornament out of something like this versus just keeping it all tight. This just gives you some choices of being able to manipulate a flower to a shape that you would like. And again, I'm adding some berries here to make this a little more interesting, a little more of impact than just the flower by itself. Again, moving things around to get the shape you'd like, um, making sure that it's got some areas of interest to all sides of the flower. And here I'm going to start by using a wire, but you can also use another trick of the trade. If you don't have any wire, you can take some of the lower leaves and just wrap it around the stems to add some additional stability there. And so that is the second floral item I'm going to add. And then the third is just a sprig of greenery, an artificial sprig of greenery. Here it looks like it's a variegated holly, and you'll see that that'll add color where you need it. Okay.
Melanie, what
Yes.
wire do you use when you're wiring this?
What gauge?
What gauge? Yes.
Okay. So I want to say it is 22, between 18 and 22, depending on what you need. But when you go to a florist and ask for that, they'll know what you're talking about.
Okay. Do you add it similarly? Is the installation of the floral sprays similar for the artificial tree and a real tree, or are there tricks for either one of those?
So yes, there are tricks, and I will show you the, 2 slides from now. I'll show you how I add them, and I will address that question
Thank you.
then, if I may.
Yes.
Okay, so now we are going to add the ornaments. Again, here I have not lighted the tree because it's difficult in a video to see what I'm doing with all the lights on. It's very bright. So my suggestion when you're adding ornaments is to put a selection of the ornaments you chose into a box. So you have it right there because they have to be equally distributed throughout the tree. I tend to break the tree into different quadrants to make sure I have enough for each side if your tree is indeed going to be seen from all sides. And always start with the largest ornaments first because they'll be the hardest to add at the end. And they will also define your distribution as well. There, and with the large ornaments, try to push them in as far into the tree as possible, so their presence is felt, but they're not overpowering to the smaller ornaments you'll be adding throughout the process. So here I'm going through and I'm adding all of the largest ornament I have, which are these glass pine cones. And again, you distribute them evenly throughout the tree, and make sure that you have enough for all sides. Okay, let's go on to the next. Okay, so here is the finished product of my adding the glass ornaments. I've tried to use a sampling of shapes and sizes and even color options within my color choice. So I'm going to, here, let's do the video. Now we're going to add the floral sprays, and I will talk about, again, I've added, I have my box of the samples of what I'm going to be using in here. Treat these just like an ornament, as your distribution will be equal throughout. And you can see, as Cindy mentioned, with an artificial tree, you can pretty much just lay them right in there. But keep in mind that you want them to flow with the movement of the branches, meaning that you lay them on top of a branch so that the movement of the floral spray pretty much mirrors the movement of the tree's branches. I've worked with people that think it's better to have them upright, but then you look at it from the side and it doesn't work. You want it to come out so they're delicately placed. And with a live tree, you really need an additional piece of wire to wire them onto the branch, because they will not lay so nicely as they do here. And this one, I have a red magnolia blossom. And again, you always have to be aware of where you place these, just following the same rules as you do with the large ornaments, equally distributed throughout the tree. And now we just did that, so I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, so ribbon. This is not my strength. I have not been able to figure out how to do ribbon properly in trees, but we wanted to talk to you all about it. So I asked Jill to step in. Jill is definitely gifted in the ribbon department. So this brief video will show you how we prepare our ribbon that we're going to use in the tree. We've opted to have just small pieces placed throughout the tree versus draping the tree with ribbon. I find that draping the tree with ribbon overpowers the other ornaments, and it's very difficult to get it in scale with the other ornaments you have. Make sure you always use a wired ribbon. The thicker the ribbon, the better. The ribbon she's using here is 4 inches thick. Anything smaller than that might be underwhelming, and anything larger than that could be overwhelming. Always cut the ribbon at an angle. If you do, fraying will be much less apparent. Again, make sure it's wired. And oh gosh, okay, there we go. So now she is going to add the ribbon, and she's done it 2 different ways. One way she does it where you do not see either end of the ribbon. You pretty much add the ribbon pieces while shoving the front and the back of the ribbon into the tree, so you really can't see where they start and where they end. She also applies some showing where they do start and where they end. So either way is adequate and beautiful. It's just, how you want to do it. But again, when you add these pieces of ribbon, treat them like another ornament. meaning that you need equal distribution, and you just don't want to overwhelm any of the other ornaments. It's definitely an added and finishing feature, but you have to be careful with how much you use. Um, and One thing that I did not mention, when you have just straight ornaments on a tree, you can create a beautiful tree, but when you add the ribbon and when you add the floral sprays, um, you stand back and you look at the tree and you're like, oh my gosh, that's what I've been missing. It just adds that extra element that really ties everything together. But again, make sure you choose pieces that are within your color palette. Otherwise, it might be a little distracting.
And how long are the ribbons that you're using?
We chose to do 24-inch sections, um, which gives you just enough to work with. Again, it depends on how large your tree is, but that seems to be a good measurement for this application.
Terrific.
And here we have our final product. I did turn the lights on for you so you can see how it complements the overall design and really makes it sparkle.
It's
So,
stunning. Can you come over to my house? I
yeah,
am.
that's the number one question we get when we do add these trees to the interior displays. We do it when the public is there as much as we can, so they can see the process, and that's the number one question we get.
I can imagine. They all want us to come and weed their gardens too.
Yeah,
So, yes.
exactly,
What
exactly.
a beautiful tree. And again, I'm looking forward to next year seeing all the great trees that you put up in the museums and really give us that holiday sparkle that our museums appreciate. And thank you so much for both of your presentations. And we do have some questions. So, Melanie, why don't you stop sharing your screen?
Okay.
We'll ask you some of these questions. But Jill, I'm going to prepare you first because the number one question is, okay, you've got those great greenhouses to grow to grow the poinsettias in. By the way, oh, I should turn on my video too. By the way, our greenhouses are out in Suitland, Maryland, and it is a closed facility, so it's not open to the public, but it's a beautiful facility, and we do have some pictures on our website that you can see what it looks like and how the things are grown out there. So, Jill, you've got the perfect conditions. I do not.
Right,
I
right.
instead of looking as nice as your poinsettias.
Yeah, well, a few things you have to remember when you do decide where you're going to put your poinsettia in your home is make sure you're not near any cold drafts, like the door opening all the time and bringing in cold air. And then the exact opposite would be like a heat vent with heat blowing on it all the time, letting it dry out, and just and keep it just room temperature, and indirect light, maybe 6 hours. They do like the sun, but not blaring sun. If you can keep it back from a window or so forth, that's the best way to take care of them. They don't like wet feet. Excuse me. So make sure if you have it in a saucer or in one of those decorative pot covers, if you do water it, let it drain for a few minutes before you put the pot cover or put it back in a saucer or in a pot that doesn't have any drainage in it. They don't like to sit in water. We've had a lot of customers come in over the years when I was doing retail with dead plants, and they would, it was watering was the biggest issue. It was either too much or not enough, and usually you could tell by just looking at the roots. And a lot of times it was just sitting in water. Or overwatering. So those are the main things. But room temperature, they can take a little cooler than maybe 65. They'll last a little longer if you go a little lower than that. But anything too hot, those centers, the actual flowers will drop out much faster and they'll start to fade faster.
Yeah, it's very good tips.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so I'm going to jump down to Melanie. I'm going to try to answer or ask questions to both of you. So, Melanie, how many strings of lights are recommended for a tree that's 6 foot by 7 foot? And if you do the same thing that you're wrapping the way that you're doing it, and do you do one side first and then the other side, or do you kind of just go around in a circle when you're putting the lights on?
Yeah, I do start at the top and work my way as much as you can all the way around. And I just lit my tree at home, and it's about 7 to 8 feet, and I think I used 10 strands. So yeah, but I like lots of lights.
Yes.
So,
I watch
um,
TV in the living room. If that many lights, that would block the TV.
well, it depends on how long your strands are too, and they sell them in strands where they're 4 inches between the lights, and then there's some that are 6 inches between the lights. So that I think um, will affect how much you use as well.
I agree. Maybe that's the difference. Maybe I have longer lengths, but I totally agree with you with the LED lights. Oh my gosh, that person should be given a medal for inventing that because
Hmm.
I've been frustrated so many years with doing it. Okay, so Jill, now for another question that we have for poinsettias, you talked about how you take care of them inside, but what do we do with all those poinsettias at the end of the year? That was another number one question.
Oh, okay.
You can say it.
Can I say it? Well, yeah, we have two installs. So when the first install comes out, the second goes in immediately. They will be composted.
Yes.
We do put them in the compost. Um, uh,
Are used.
yes, yes, yes,
They're rejuvenated.
exactly.
Okay.
So
So what happened to all of them this year? They're still sitting in the greenhouse. Some of the museums are using them. I know
yes,
that as staff goes in, for everyone that doesn't know, all our museums are closed at this time, but the gardens are open. But unfortunately, we're a little bit too chilly to put the poinsettias outside in the
yes,
gardens. We're not Mexico or Guatemala or Guadalajara or even Key West where I lived. We could put them outside. So they're sitting there looking beautiful for everyone in the greenhouse. Yeah.
yep.
It's just another challenge when you do that much work, but
Yeah, yeah, but you never know. We didn't know at the time, and we've gone through every season now with issues. We had spring, we were able to use most of our plants. Fall, we scaled down. We cut down on our numbers and what we actually needed, and we took everything went down to the gardens and was planted. Poinsettias have to be ordered in. When you pick out varieties, in order to get the varieties you want, you have to order them in April or March.
mhm.
So, at that time, we didn't know what was going to happen in this time of the year. So we had to make the decision to order them and go ahead as usual. So that's just kind of how we did. We just went full steam ahead, and I worked in the greenhouse all summer. And I think that Melanie was saying how we had a great crop. I think a lot of it was we weren't on Zoom meetings. We weren't doing other things. We were in the greenhouse. We weren't sitting at desks. We were actually in there doing a lot of greenhouse work in the last, several months. So it really reflects on the quality that we put out this year. And, it's what we do. So we were in there a lot. We were spending a lot of time just taking care of everything, and it turned out really well. It's just a shame that nobody can get to really see them. So I'm hoping that everybody's enjoying it today. At least I had some good pictures of the crop this year, and
Yeah.
everybody's enjoying that at
But
least.
they're going to be able to see some of them because we're creating videos right now that will be shared on our social media.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to see those beautiful poinsettias through our videos. So please check back on our social media. We'll be publishing them next week so you can see how wonderful they look. And I know it's not wasted because you gain knowledge from growing each and every one of those poinsettias. The same thing for the trees, Melanie. You've gained knowledge through the year. You've shared information with us. And the question for you was, what do you do with the ornaments after the holidays? Where do they go? And we should put a picture up of your storage room.
Yeah, storage is growing every year. Yeah, we have 3 or 4 sea containers devoted to all the props we use and decorations, and we try to reuse as much as possible. We know what we have, we're inventorying it all, spending a lot of time getting it all mapped out so we can be much more efficient in our use of these ornaments every year.
Mhm.
And I think we're going to have it down to a science.
I think so too. And there are two questions I feel that we have to answer. Uh, can we sell the poinsettias? And no, we're a federal facility, so we can't sell the poinsettias afterwards. So that's not possible. You'll just have to come and enjoy them next year or look on our social media this year to enjoy them. And then you're getting asked, can we volunteer with you? So both
Yes, we love it.
Uh, we don't have volunteers right now because of our situation, but we look forward to gaining more volunteers next year. So it's 1 o'clock, and I want to thank you both for the information. And I especially want to thank our viewers because you have been steadfast and loyal, and we appreciate this brand new option that we gave this year. This was a challenging year, but for the first time ever, we've reached out to a broader audience for our programming, and you were also very receptive, and we really appreciate your time. So thank you for doing that, and we look forward to seeing you again in January, where we're going to add more topics, more speakers, and cover even more information to help you turn your brown thumb green. So happy holidays, everyone. Hopefully you'll join us tomorrow for Gardens of Resilience, and hopefully in the spirit, if you'd like to support our gardens, please go and donate some money. We'd really greatly appreciate it. So thanks to all, and to all a good night.